The call came in at 2:47 in the morning, and I know that because I was staring at the clock on the wall of the processing center when my phone buzzed against my thigh. I was standing in a temporary holding facility outside of Kabul. Not a place I can describe in detail, not even now. Finishing a debrief that had run 6 hours past schedule. My team had been embedded with a joint task force for 11 weeks. 11 weeks of sand in my teeth, of sleeping in 4-hour windows, of knowing that the work I was doing mattered even when I couldn't talk about it to anyone outside that room. My phone wasn't supposed to be on. I looked at the screen and didn't recognize the number, but the area code was home. Something in my chest tightened before I even answered. "Is this the mother of Lily?" A woman's voice said. I stepped outside. The night air hit me like a wall. "Yes," I said. "I'm her mother." "What happened?" "Ma'am, I'm a nurse at Riverside General. Your daughter was brought in about an hour ago. She's stable right now, but her condition when she arrived. We need you to know it's serious. There are injuries we're required to report." I remember pressing my back against the concrete wall and sliding down it until I was sitting on the ground. I remember the gravel under my boots. I remember thinking, very clearly, she was supposed to be safe. She was at her father's house. I had agreed to that. I had signed paperwork and trusted a judge and trusted a man I should have stopped trusting years before I actually did. "What kind of injuries?" I asked. The nurse paused. It was a specific kind of pause, the kind that means someone is choosing their words carefully because they're afraid of something. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "your daughter has bruising on her arms and on her back, consistent with..." She stopped. Then, "Can I ask where you're calling from?" "I'm overseas. I'm with the federal government. I can't say more than that." Another pause. Shorter this time. "I'm going to give you my direct line," she said. "Not the main desk. Mine. Call me back on this number when you land." Her name was Nina. She had just done something she wasn't supposed to do, and I think we both knew it, and I think she did it anyway, because she looked at my daughter and saw something that made her certain she had no other choice. My ex-husband and I divorced 3 years ago. I want to be clear about the language because I was not always clear about it, and that lack of clarity cost me in ways I'm still untangling. He is my ex-husband. We were married for 6 years. We have one daughter together. Her name is Lily, and she is 8 years old, and she has her father's jaw and my mother's eyes, and she has never once in her life deserved a single thing that has happened to her in the last year. When I say ex-husband, I mean the man who stood in a courtroom and told a judge that my job made me an unstable parent. I mean the man who cited my deployments, my clearance level, my unavailability as evidence that Lily would be better off primarily with him. I mean the man who was very convincing, standing there in a suit, looking like a concerned father, while I sat across from him in my dress uniform and somehow looked like the variable. The judge gave him primary custody. I got her every third weekend and alternating holidays and phone calls whenever schedules permitted. That phrase, "whenever schedules permitted," has lived in my chest like a splinter ever since. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my ex-husband remarried. Her name is Tatum. She is 31 years old. She teaches spin classes and has a very curated social media presence, and she moved into the house where my daughter sleeps within 4 months of meeting my ex-husband. I know all of this because Lily told me. Lily, who was 7 years old at the time, who called me from the bathroom of that house one Sunday evening and whispered, "Mommy, I don't think she likes me very much." I reported that call to my attorney. My attorney reported it to the court. The court did nothing. Tatum's older brother is the county sheriff. I didn't know that when I signed the custody agreement. I found out later from a neighbor of my ex-husband's who felt uncomfortable enough about what she was seeing to look me up and send me a message. By then, I was already overseas. By then, Lily had already been in that house for 9 months. I should have fought harder. I know that now. I know it the way you know things that are already too late to change, viscerally, uselessly, with the kind of guilt that doesn't go anywhere no matter how many times you examine it. I booked the first flight out of Kabul at 4:15 in the morning. My commanding officer didn't ask questions. He saw my face and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Go." I have worked with Colonel Rutherford for 4 years, and he is not a soft man, but he has a daughter of his own, and I think something in the way I was standing told him everything he needed to know. The flight to Frankfurt was 9 hours. Frankfurt to Chicago was another 9. I sat in a middle seat for 18 hours, with my knees pressed against the seat in front of me and my phone in my hand, and I called Nina's number the moment we touched down at O'Hare. She answered on the second ring. "She's been asking for you," she said. That was the first thing she said. I exhaled so hard the woman next to me turned to look. "Tell me everything," I said. Nina was civil. She was a pediatric nurse with 17 years of experience, and she knew exactly which words were documentation and which words were conversation, and she kept them very deliberately separate. What she told me, in conversation, was this: Lily had been brought in by my ex-husband's wife. Not by my ex-husband. By Tatum, who had told the intake nurse that Lily had fallen down the stairs. The attending physician had examined Lily and noted, in the official record, that the pattern of bruising on her back was inconsistent with a single fall. He had been required by law to file a mandatory report. The mandatory report had gone to the county sheriff's office, Tatum's brother's office. "Has anyone from that office come to the hospital?" I asked. "A deputy came," Nina said. "He spoke with the woman who brought her in. He was here for about 20 minutes. He told our social worker that the family had been interviewed and the incident appeared to be accidental." 20 minutes, I said. "Yes, and the physician's report is in the record," she said, "where it will stay." I understood what she was telling me. The report existed. It was documented. It was real. But the people responsible for acting on it had decided not to, and they had done it quickly and quietly and without anyone present who might push back. "Nina," I said. I was standing at the baggage claim, watching the carousel spin, not actually seeing it. "What aren't you able to tell me?" She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not able to tell you," she said slowly, "that the marks on your daughter's back look like they were made by a hand. I'm not able to tell you that, because it's not my place to interpret the physician's findings." She paused. "But I can tell you that your daughter told me her tummy hurts when she has to go home. She told me that this morning without being asked. I wrote it in my notes." I thanked her. I don't remember what I said exactly, because my vision had gone a little strange around the edges, the way it does when your body is processing something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. I picked up my bag from the carousel, and I walked to the rental car desk, and I was very, very calm. That calm is something I learned in training. It doesn't mean I wasn't feeling anything. It means I had somewhere to put it. My ex-husband's father met me at the hospital. This part surprises people when I tell it. It surprised me too, though maybe it shouldn't have. My former father-in-law, I'll call him my ex's father because that's what he is to me now, a man whose son I used to be married to, had called me twice while I was in the air. I hadn't seen the calls until I landed. The voicemails were brief. The first one said, "I know what happened. I'm at the hospital." The second one said, "I'm sorry. I've been here since last night." He was sitting in the pediatric ward waiting area when I arrived. He looked like he had aged 5 years since I'd last seen him at Lily's birthday in March. He stood up when he saw me. "She's sleeping," he said. "They gave her something for the pain." I had to stop walking for a second. "The pain," I said. He pressed his lips together and looked at the floor. "My son," he started. "Was he there?" I asked. "He says he wasn't home. He says he was at work." He looked up at me. "I don't know if that's true." I looked at this man. This 64-year-old man, who had always been kind to me, who had sat across from me at Thanksgiving tables and taught my daughter how to fish and given me a hug at the airport the one time I came home early and surprised everyone. And I understood something I hadn't understood before. He was ashamed. He was ashamed of his son, ashamed of the woman his son had married, ashamed that he hadn't seen it sooner or done something sooner or said something to someone sooner than right now, in a hospital waiting room with his granddaughters asleep 30 feet away. "I need to see her," I said. "Of course," he said. He stepped aside. Lily was small in that hospital bed. She has always been small. She's on the lower end of the growth chart, and her pediatrician jokes every year that she'll hit a growth spurt and surprise us all. But she looked very small right then. She had an IV in her left hand. There was a bruise along her left forearm that was yellow-greened at the edges, which meant it was older than the ones on her back, which meant this had not been the first time. I sat on the edge of her bed, and I took her right hand, and I didn't say anything because I couldn't, not right away, and that was fine because she was asleep. I sat there for a long time. A nurse came in, not Nina, a different one, and checked her chart and gave me a look that I can only describe as grief, the kind that healthcare workers carry when they see things they can't unsee and can't fully talk about. "Are you her mother?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She nodded once and left. Lily woke up about 40 minutes later. She saw me and her face did something complicated. She started to cry and then she stopped herself and then she started again and I pulled her very carefully into my arms and held her and told her I was there. I was right there. I wasn't going anywhere. "Mommy," she said into my shoulder. "I know," I said. "I know, baby. I've got you." She didn't tell me what happened. Not that day. But she held my hand so tight that my knuckles ached and she didn't let go, not for hours, and that told me everything she couldn't say yet. The county sheriff's office had closed the case. I found this out the next morning, when I went to the station to file a formal report myself. The deputy at the front desk told me the incident had been reviewed and determined to be accidental. He said it with the particular flatness of someone reading off a script. I asked to speak with someone in charge. He told me the sheriff was unavailable. I asked when the sheriff would be available. He told me he couldn't say. I stood at that counter for a long moment. "I want to file a report," I said. "A new one, from me, as the child's mother and legal guardian." "Ma'am," as I said, "the incident has already been." "I understand what you said. I want to file a new report." "That is my right." He gave me a form. I took it. I sat down in one of the plastic chairs along the wall and I filled it out in full, every line, every box, with the date and time, and the name of the attending physician, and the case number from the hospital, and a detailed account of what Nina had told me. I handed it back. He took it without looking at me. I walked out to my rental car and I called my attorney. My attorney, to her credit, was already awake. She had already pulled the hospital records. I had signed the release forms the night before. She had already spoken with a colleague who specialized in family court cases involving child protective services. She said words like evidentiary record and jurisdictional conflict and expedited modification hearing, and I absorbed all of it because I had trained myself to absorb information under pressure. And this was pressure I had never felt before, not even in the field. "What's the fastest way to get her out of that house?" I asked. "Emergency custody modification," she said. "We file today. We cite the hospital admission, the physician's mandatory report, and the CPS report that was filed." CPS was called? "Nina filed a separate report through the state system," my attorney said. "Not through the county. It's under state jurisdiction, which means the sheriff's office can't touch it." I sat in my car in the parking lot of the county sheriff's office and I felt something shift. Nina had known. She had filed through the state specifically because she understood that the county route was compromised. She had done that quietly and deliberately, and without anyone asking her to. I thought about calling her. I didn't want to put her in a difficult position. Instead, I sent a text to the number she'd given me. Just 2 words. "Thank you," she replied 3 minutes later. "Take care of your girl." The emergency custody modification was filed by noon. What happened next was not fast, and it was not clean. And anyone who has been through family court will understand that even obvious cases require an enormous amount of documentation and patience, and the particular stamina of someone who has decided they will not stop. I had that stamina. I had spent 11 weeks in a forward operating base, and I had done that with a clear head, and I could do this. My ex-husband's father offered to help. He came to my attorney's office with documents, financials records, text messages between his son and Tatum that he had seen on his son's unlocked phone and photographed. Messages that referenced Lily in terms that made my stomach turn. Messages that made it clear my ex-husband had been aware that Tatum's treatment of Lily was not accidental. Messages where he told her in writing to be more careful about leaving marks. I read those messages once. Then I handed my phone to my attorney. "Is this admissible?" I asked. "We'll argue it is," she said. My ex's father sat across from me at that conference table and he was very still. "I should have done this sooner," he said. "Yes," I said. I wasn't unkind about it. It was just true. I didn't want to believe my son was. He stopped. "I know," I said. And I did know. I had spent 3 years not fully believing it either, or believing it but telling myself I was being paranoid, or believing it but not knowing what to do about it from 11 time zones away. We had that in common, this old man and I. We had both loved the wrong version of the same person for too long. He testified at the emergency hearing. He didn't have to. Nobody asked him to except me, and even I left it as a question rather than a request. He showed up on his own. The hearing lasted 2 days. My attorney presented the physician's report, Nina's CPS report, the photographs of Lily's injuries, and the text messages. She presented testimony from Nina, who sat in that witness chair with the particular quiet confidence of someone who has spent 17 years doing the right thing in difficult circumstances. And from Lily's school circumstancer, who had documented 3 separate conversations with Lily over the past 6 months. 3 conversations. Documented. Filed. Ignored by the same system that had decided a 20-minute visit from a deputy constituted a thorough investigation. The family court judge was a woman named Judge Calloway. I don't know much about her beyond that, except that she read every document in the file before the hearing began, and she asked very precise questions, and she had a way of looking at witnesses that made it clear she was paying complete attention. My ex-husband's attorney argued that the injuries were accidental and that my ex-husband had no knowledge of any mistreatment. He argued that I was an unstable presence due to my profession. He used the word unpredictable. He suggested that a mother who could be sent overseas for 11 weeks at a time was not the appropriate primary parent. Judge Calloway let him finish. Then she said, "The physician's report and the corroborating documentation indicate a pattern, not an incident. Please speak to the pattern." He couldn't. Lily came home with me. Not to my apartment, which is small and has been minimally furnished since I spend so much of my time elsewhere. My mother drove down from Wisconsin and helped me set up a room for Lily in 48 hours. She bought purple curtains because Lily had told her once that purple was her favorite color. She bought a little lamp shaped like a moon. She made lasagna and put it in the freezer in individual portions, so Lily could have it whenever she wanted. My mother is not a sentimental woman. She raised me alone after my father died when I was 4, and she has strong opinions about self-sufficiency, and she is not someone who says, "I love you," very often. But she drove 6 hours and hung purple curtains and made lasagna and slept on my couch, so she could be there when Lily woke up in a new place. That, I think, is what love looks like when words aren't quite enough. Lily slept for 11 hours the first night. She woke up and came padding into the kitchen in her socks and looked at my mother making coffee and looked at me at the table, and she said, very matter-of-factly, "Are we staying here now?" "Yes," I said. She thought about this. She poured herself a glass of orange juice. She sat down across from me. "Okay," she said. My ex-husband was sentenced to 18 months. The text messages constituted evidence of complicity in child abuse. His attorney negotiated, but the photographs of Lily's injuries and the physician's report and the pattern documented by the school counselor made negotiating difficult. He pled guilty to 1 count of endangering the welfare of a child. His attorney said he maintained that he had not directly harmed Lily, and that may even be technically true in a narrow sense, but he had watched it happen and protected the person who did it and lied about it to a court, and the court took a particular view of that. Tatum was charged separately. Her attorney did not negotiate as successfully. She received 3 years. The county sheriff resigned the week after the state investigation was opened, the one that had been triggered by Nina's report going through the state system instead of the county. He cited personal reasons. I did not feel bad about that. The state investigation found that the county sheriff's office had improperly handled mandatory reports on at least 4 prior occasions, involving families connected to the sheriff, personally or professionally. I don't know what has happened with those cases. I hope someone is looking into them. I took medical leave for 2 months. My commanding officer did not argue with this. He said, "Take what you need." I think I had expected to have to fight for it, and not having to fight for it made me cry in a way that the rest of it hadn't, which is a strange thing about grief. It comes out sideways, at the moment you are braced for a blow that doesn't land. I spent those 2 months in my apartment with Lily and my mother, and a lot of purple curtains and a lot of lasagna. Lily started seeing a therapist, a pediatric trauma specialist recommended by Nina, who had by then become something I hesitate to call a friend, only because the word feels insufficient. She continued to document Lily's progress in ways that were thorough and careful and entirely characteristic of who she was. Lily does not talk about what happened very often. When she does, I listen. I don't push. I don't prompt. I have learned in those months to hold space for silence in a way that my job had never required me to. And that turned out to be one of the most important things I've ever learned. She sleeps well now. She has opinions about her curtains, and about which lamp belongs in which corners, and about what we should have for dinner on Friday nights. She is, in the way that children are, both more resilient and more fragile than I ever would have predicted, and I hold both of those truths very carefully. I went back to work in March. Not overseas, not yet. I asked to be reassigned to a domestic position, at least temporarily, and the request was granted. I work out of a federal building 40 minutes from my apartment. I come home most evenings. I pick Lily up from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays when my schedule allows, and on the days it doesn't, my mother does, because she moved permanently to a studio apartment 6 blocks away in January and has not once mentioned this as a sacrifice. My attorney is still my attorney. She sends me updates on the related cases from the state investigation, the ones involving those other families, and I read them and I feel something complicated. Relief that it's being addressed, grief that it wasn't addressed sooner. Anger that is no longer sharp but has become something more like weather, present in the background, changing the temperature of things. Nina came to Lily's birthday party in February. She brought a book, a big illustrated one about women who had done extraordinary things. And Lily stayed up past her bedtime reading it. I watched Nina eat birthday cake at my kitchen table, and I thought about that phone call in Kabul, the one she wasn't supposed to make, the direct line she wasn't supposed to give out, and I thought about what it had cost her to make that choice, and what it had made possible. I never asked her why she did it. I think I knew. She looked at an 8-year-old girl with bruises on her back, and she thought about what that child needed, and she made a decision. The same way you make decisions in the field. When the protocol and the right thing point in different directions, and you have about 30 seconds to choose. You choose the child. You choose the child and you do it fast and you don't look back. Lily fell asleep that night, still holding the book. I took it from her hands carefully and set it on her nightstand, next to the moon lamp, and I stood in the doorway of her purple-curtained room for a long time. I have been afraid of many things in my career. I have been in situations where fear was the most rational response available, and I have moved through it anyway because the work required it. But I do not think I have ever been as afraid as I was in that baggage claim in Chicago, holding a phone with a stranger's number on it, understanding for the first time what it means to be powerless in the precise place where you most need not to be. I was powerless for exactly as long as it took me to find the people who weren't. That is what I want Lily to know. Someday, when she's old enough to hear the whole story, that when the system failed her, there were still people in it who refused to. A nurse who filed the right report through the right channel. A grandfather who finally chose his granddaughter over his son. An attorney who knew exactly which words to use and when. A judge who read every page. The system is not the people in it. Sometimes the people are better than the system. Sometimes you have to find those people and hand them what they need, and trust them to do what they can. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, that is enough.